My name is Katherine. I'm 38 years old, and I survived what no child should ever endure. My sister sexually abused me for years, while my parents not only looked the other way, but blamed me. At 16, I fled that nightmare, rebuilding my life from nothing. 8 years of peace shattered when my family forced their way back into my life, putting my nephews at risk of the same horror I endured. What they never expected was that the scared girl they tormented had become a woman strong enough to bring them all to justice. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button if you believe every survivor deserves justice. Your support means everything to those of us who had to create our own happy endings. I grew up in a seemingly normal suburban neighborhood outside Atlanta, Georgia. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American family, with a beautiful two-story home, well-maintained lawn, and parents who attended every school function. But behind closed doors, the reality was starkly different. My parents, James and Margaret Wilson, made no secret of their preference for my older sister Amanda. From my earliest memories, there was a clear distinction in how we were treated. Amanda got new clothes, I got hand-me-downs. Amanda received lavish birthday parties with dozens of friends invited, while mine were simple family affairs, sometimes even forgotten until the last minute. "Katherine, why can't you be more like your sister?" became my mother's constant refrain. No matter how hard I tried, I could never measure up. If I brought home an A, Amanda's B was somehow more impressive. If I cleaned the entire house, my mother would find the one spot I missed while praising Amanda for washing a single dish. My father was physically present but emotionally absent when it came to me. He worked as a financial advisor, often bringing home gifts for Amanda while forgetting I existed. I remember one Christmas when I was 9, Amanda received a beautiful new bicycle with all the accessories, while I got a secondhand art set with half the colors already used. "Dad, do you want to see the drawing I made?" I asked one evening when I was about 10. "Not now, Katherine. Amanda's telling me about her soccer game," he replied without even looking at me. Hours later, when I tried again, he had already forgotten. "Maybe tomorrow," he said, a promise that was never kept. The only person who showed me genuine love was my grandmother, my father's mother, Elizabeth. She lived about 20 minutes away, and visiting her became my sanctuary. Grandma Elizabeth could see through Amanda's manipulative behavior and often tried to speak to my parents about their unfair treatment. "James, that child is starving for your attention," I overheard her telling my father once. "You're going to regret this one day." "Mom, you don't understand. Katherine is just so difficult. Amanda is easier to connect with," he responded defensively. With Grandma Elizabeth, I felt valued. She taught me to bake, told me stories about her childhood, and always made sure I knew I was loved. "You're special, Katherine," she would say, holding my face in her wrinkled hands. "Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise." When I was 12, my grandmother died unexpectedly from a heart attack. My world collapsed. At her funeral, I cried uncontrollably while my parents seemed more concerned about Amanda's minor performance in the church choir than my heartbreak over losing my only ally. After Grandma Elizabeth's death, Amanda's psychological torment intensified. She would take my homework and hide it, causing me to get in trouble at school. She'd sneak into my room and steal my few treasured possessions, only to find them later earning praise from our parents for being helpful. By 13, I was developing signs of depression. My teachers noticed my withdrawal, but parent-teacher conferences only resulted in my parents defending Amanda and dismissing concerns about me. "Katherine has always been dramatic," my mother would say with a practiced sigh. "She's just jealous of her sister's accomplishments." I threw myself into academics, hoping achievements would finally win my parents' approval. I joined every club I could, stayed up late studying, and volunteered for community service. Nothing worked. Any recognition I received was minimized, while Amanda's participation in the same activities was celebrated as extraordinary. As we entered our teen years, the disparity in our treatment became even more pronounced. Amanda, now 15, and me, 13, was allowed freedoms I couldn't imagine receiving at the same age. She had a later curfew, less supervision, and virtually no consequences for breaking rules. "Your sister is more responsible," my mother would explain when I questioned the double standard. When you prove yourself like she has, you'll get the same privileges. But how could I prove myself when every attempt was undermined or ignored? Amanda began to realize the power she held in our family dynamic. Her smile would turn cruel when our parents weren't looking. She learned she could blame me for things she did wrong, and our parents would believe her without question. Looking back now, I can see all the red flags that preceded what would come next. The isolation, the psychological manipulation, the grooming. But at the time, I was just a child trying to survive in a home where I was the designated scapegoat, unaware that things would get so much worse. The summer I turned 14 marked the beginning of the darkest chapter of my life. Amanda was 16, popular at school, and somehow still our parents' perfect angel, despite her increasingly troubling behavior. It started with what seemed like accidents, but looking back, I now recognize as calculated first steps in her escalating abuse. One morning, I was changing in our shared bathroom when Amanda barged in without knocking. I quickly tried to cover myself, but she just laughed and lingered, her eyes moving over me in a way that made my skin crawl. "What's the big deal? We're sisters," she said when I asked her to leave. "You're so uptight, Katherine." Similar accidents became more frequent. She would brush against me inappropriately while passing in the hallway. She'd walk in while I was showering and take her time grabbing whatever she supposedly needed. Each time my discomfort grew, but I didn't have the language or understanding to identify what was happening. One evening, I finally worked up the courage to tell my parents about Amanda's behavior during dinner. "Mom, Dad, Amanda keeps coming into the bathroom when I'm changing or showering. It makes me really uncomfortable," I said quietly, my heart pounding. The silence that followed was deafening. Then my father put down his fork with a sigh. "Katherine, are we really doing this again? Your sister has better things to do than whatever you're implying." My mother's response was even worse. "You know, Katherine, it sounds like you're seeking attention in very inappropriate ways. Amanda, sweetheart, I'm sorry you have to deal with these accusations." Amanda smiled sweetly. "It's okay, Mom. Katherine has always had a vivid imagination." That night, Amanda came to my room after our parents went to bed. She sat on the edge of my bed, her weight creating a depression that made me roll slightly toward her. "That was a stupid move," she whispered. "If you ever try to make me look bad again, I'll tell Mom and Dad you tried to kiss me. Who do you think they'll believe?" Around this time, Amanda started dating Tyler Jackson, a senior with a reputation for trouble. Instead of our parents being concerned, they welcomed him into our home, thrilled that their daughter had attracted such a popular boyfriend. I immediately sensed something unsettling about the way Tyler looked at me, something predatory that mirrored the way Amanda had started watching me. One Saturday afternoon, when our parents were at a neighbor's anniversary party, Amanda invited Tyler over. I stayed in my room, door locked, doing homework. I heard them drinking and laughing downstairs, getting louder as the afternoon progressed. When I needed to use the bathroom, I listened carefully to make sure they were still downstairs before quickly slipping across the hall. I was washing my hands when the door opened. I had forgotten to lock it. Amanda stood there, Tyler behind her, both clearly intoxicated. "Look who's here," Amanda slurred, pushing her way in. "My little sister thinks she's too good to hang out with us." "I was just going back to my room," I said, trying to squeeze past them. Amanda blocked my exit. "Tyler thinks you're pretty. Don't you want to say thank you?" "Please let me go," I whispered, panic rising in my throat. What happened next has taken years of therapy to process. Amanda cornered me, touching me while Tyler watched, encouraging her. I froze, my teenage mind unable to process that my own sister was assaulting me. When it was finally over, Amanda leaned in and whispered, "This stays between us. No one would believe you anyway." After that day, I lived in constant fear of being alone with Amanda. I started sleeping with my desk chair propped under my doorknob. I'd leave for school early and return home only when I knew our parents would be there. But Amanda always found opportunities. My grades began to slip. I stopped talking to the few friends I had. A concerned English teacher, Mrs. Daniels, pulled me aside one day after noticing the change in my behavior. "Katherine, I've noticed you seem withdrawn lately. Is everything okay at home?" she asked gently. For a brief moment, I considered telling her everything. The words were on the tip of my tongue. But then I remembered Amanda's threats and my parents' dismissal. "I'm just tired. Studying a lot," I mumbled. Mrs. Daniels didn't push, but she did suggest I speak with the school counselor, Mr. Peterson. In a moment of desperation, I agreed. During our session, I carefully hinted at problems at home without explicitly mentioning the abuse. Mr. Peterson, thinking he was helping, called my parents to discuss my concerning behavior. That night was one of the worst. My parents confronted me for spreading lies about our perfect family. Amanda watched from the doorway with a satisfied smirk as our father lectured me about the importance of family loyalty and how I was just seeking attention. "I didn't say anything specific," I protested tearfully. "Then why would the counselor call us?" my mother demanded. "Amanda never causes these problems. It's always you, Katherine." As punishment, my parents took away my phone and computer privileges, further isolating me from any potential help. Amanda, emboldened by this reinforcement that she was untouchable, escalated her abuse. What had started as inappropriate touching became more violent and deliberate. Each time her threats became more specific and frightening. "If you tell, I'll make sure you're sent away," she would say. "No one wants you here anyway." I began to believe her. In the twisted reality of our home, I had become the problem, the liar, the troublemaker. Amanda was the golden child who could do no wrong. And worst of all, I had nowhere to turn for help. By the time I turned 15, my home had become a prison, and Amanda, now 17, had complete control over our family dynamic. She manipulated our parents with expert precision, ensuring they remained blind to her increasingly disturbing behavior. Their perception of her as the perfect daughter never wavered, while I was cast permanently as the problem child, the liar, the attention seeker. On a rainy April evening when our parents attended a weekend financial planning conference in Charlotte, Amanda's abuse reached its horrific peak. I had planned to stay at a classmate's house, fabricating a group project as an excuse, but at the last minute my classmate's mother called to reschedule. I found myself trapped alone in the house with Amanda, who had invited Tyler over again. I barricaded myself in my room, pushing my dresser against the door, but it wasn't enough. They had been drinking heavily, and I could hear them coming up the stairs laughing in a way that made my blood run cold. "Katherine," Amanda sang through the door. "Open up. We just want to talk to you." When I didn't respond, the pounding began. The combined force of Amanda and Tyler eventually shoved the door open enough to squeeze through. What happened next was so traumatic that my mind has mercifully blurred some of the details, but I remember Amanda holding me down while Tyler watched and encouraged her. I remember begging them to stop. I remember Amanda whispering terrible things in my ear about how no one would ever love me except her, that this was all I was good for. I dissociated during the worst of it, floating somewhere near the ceiling, watching what was happening to my body as if it were happening to someone else. When they finally left, I curled into a ball and sobbed until there were no tears left. That night changed something fundamental inside me. The fear and confusion gave way to a cold, clear realization I would never be safe in this house. No one was coming to save me. If I wanted to survive, I would have to save myself. The next morning, I could barely move from the pain, but I forced myself to shower, scrubbing my skin until it was raw. With shaking hands, I collected evidence of what had happened, torn clothing, photographs of bruises, and a terrifying voice recording Amanda had made to threaten me with later. I stored everything in an old backpack of Grandma Elizabeth's that I kept hidden in my closet. For 2 weeks, I moved through the house like a ghost, avoiding Amanda and planning my next steps. I had to be strategic. I had learned from past mistakes that simply telling my parents would only make things worse. I needed irrefutable evidence and the perfect moment. That moment came when Amanda started showing signs of illness in the mornings. I overheard her talking to my mother about feeling nauseated and missing her period. A terrible suspicion formed in my mind, one too awful to contemplate. When the pregnancy test my mother bought came back positive, our house erupted in chaos, though not the kind I expected. Rather than the disgrace I thought might finally open my parents' eyes, They rallied around Amanda, treating the pregnancy as unfortunate but manageable. They automatically assumed Tyler was the father, and discussions quickly turned to whether Amanda would keep the baby or if adoption was a better choice. I gathered every ounce of courage I had and approached my parents one evening while Amanda was at a doctor's appointment with Tyler. "I need to tell you something, and I have proof this time," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I showed them the evidence I'd collected: the photos, the recording, the torn clothes. I explained through tears what had been happening, culminating in the assault 2 weeks prior. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Then my father's face contorted with rage, not at Amanda, but at me. "How dare you?" he hissed. "Your sister is going through the most difficult time of her life, and you concoct these disgusting lies." My mother was even worse. She slapped me hard across the face, something she had never done before. "You're trying to ruin your sister's life because you're jealous of the attention her pregnancy is getting," she spat. "What kind of sick person makes up stories about their own sibling?" But the truly devastating blow came next. "We've always known there was something wrong with you," my father said coldly. "The way you dress, the way you act. You probably tempted Tyler, and now you're trying to blame Amanda because you're ashamed." It was in that moment that I realized the full extent of their delusion. In their minds, I was not only a liar, but somehow responsible for my own abuse. They were suggesting that I had somehow invited this trauma, perhaps even seduced my sister's boyfriend. That night, I overheard them talking in hushed tones in the kitchen. "We need to protect Amanda and the baby," my father said. "Katherine is becoming dangerous with these accusations." "My sister and Savannah said they could take her," my mother replied. "Just until after the baby comes. It would give everyone some space." They were planning to send me away to protect my abuser and discard me like an inconvenient problem. The realization should have broken me completely, but instead, it crystallized my resolve. I would not be their sacrifice. In English class that week, we had an assignment to write about personal heroes. As I researched various historical figures who had overcome adversity, I found myself drawn to stories of people who had escaped impossible situations. I started secretly researching youth shelters, resources for runaway teens, and the legal process of emancipation. I had a part-time job at the local library that my parents barely acknowledged. For months, I had been saving most of my meager paycheck, originally hoping to move out when I turned 18. Now those savings would fund my escape at 16. As Amanda's pregnancy progressed, her abuse didn't stop, it merely changed form. She would corner me in the hallway, her growing belly pressing against me as she whispered threats about what would happen after the baby came. "Mom and Dad are sending you away, but I told them you should stay," she taunted. "The baby will need an aunt to help out. Won't that be fun? You'll do whatever I say, or I'll tell them you tried to hurt the baby." The final breaking point came when I overheard my parents and Amanda discussing the baby's paternity test results with hushed concern. The words I caught made my blood freeze: inconclusive and familial match. They weren't just covering up my abuse anymore. They were hiding the horrifying possibility that the baby Amanda carried might be related to me in an unthinkable way. The implications were too monstrous to fully comprehend, but one thing became crystal clear: I had to get out immediately. The day I left home forever began like any other. My parents ignored me at breakfast. Amanda made veiled threats disguised as sister banter, and I pretended everything was normal while my escape plan burned in my mind. It was September 14th, a date now etched in my memory as my personal Independence Day. For weeks, I had been gradually moving essential items to my school locker, important documents I'd stolen back from my parents' filing cabinet, extra clothes, the emergency cash I'd saved, and the evidence of Amanda's abuse that I couldn't risk leaving behind. That morning, I placed the final items in my backpack: a photo of my grandmother, the only family memento worth keeping, and a prepaid phone I'd purchased in secret. After school, instead of taking the bus home, I walked to the bank where I emptied my savings account of the $1,843.27 I'd accumulated over 2 years. The teller raised an eyebrow at a teenager withdrawing that much cash but didn't question me further. Next, I went to the bus station and purchased a one-way ticket to Chicago, a city large enough to get lost in, but far enough away that my family wouldn't think to look for me there. As I sat in the back of the Greyhound bus watching my hometown disappear into the distance, I felt equal measures of terror and relief. I had no idea what awaited me in Chicago, but anything seemed better than the hell I was leaving behind. For the entire 14-hour journey, I remained vigilant, certain that at any moment my father would appear and drag me back home. Every time the bus stopped, my heart raced until we were moving again. I arrived in Chicago at dawn, disoriented and exhausted. The massive city overwhelmed my senses after the suburban neighborhood I'd grown up in. I had researched youth shelters beforehand and made my way to New Horizons, a facility specifically for teens escaping abuse. With shaking hands, I approached the front desk. "I need help," I said simply to the woman at reception. "I ran away from home. I can't go back." The woman, whose name tag read Jessica, had kind eyes that had seen too many stories like mine. She didn't press for details immediately, instead focusing on my immediate needs: food, a shower, and rest. Once I had eaten and settled into an assigned bed in the female dormitory, Jessica invited me to talk in a private counseling room. It took hours to tell my story, the words coming in halting bursts between tears. Jessica took notes, occasionally asking gentle questions, but mostly just listening. When I finally finished, the weight of keeping these secrets for so long left me completely drained. "Katherine," Jessica said carefully, "what you've described is sexual abuse and family neglect. We need to report this to authorities." The investigation that followed was both validating and devastating. Detectives interviewed me extensively, but when they contacted my family, they encountered a united front of denial. Amanda played the role of the concerned, heartbroken sister. My parents presented themselves as loving, worried parents, blindsided by their troubled daughter's disappearance and subsequent false accusations. Without witnesses and with limited physical evidence, much of what I had collected had degraded over time. The case stalled. The detectives believed me, but believing wasn't enough for prosecution. However, their involvement did achieve one crucial outcome with Jessica's help. As my advocate and the preliminary findings of the investigation, I was able to begin the process of legal emancipation. The court appointed a guardian ad litem who, after reviewing my case, strongly recommended emancipation rather than foster care given my age and circumstances. At 16 and a half, I legally became my own guardian. My parents, perhaps relieved to be absolved of responsibility for their problem child, didn't contest it. With my legal status secured, I faced the daunting challenge of supporting myself. Jessica helped me find a small room in a shared apartment with another young woman who had aged out of the foster system. I took 2 jobs, morning shifts at a bakery and evening work at a grocery store while studying for my GED. Those first months on my own were brutally hard. I was constantly exhausted, perpetually worried about money, and struggling with nightmares and panic attacks. But for the first time in my life, I was safe. No one was hurting me. No one was gaslighting me or making me question my reality. The freedom from abuse was worth every hardship. At the bakery, I met Sarah, a retired teacher who came in every morning for coffee. She noticed me studying during breaks and offered to help. Sarah became the mentor I desperately needed, tutoring me for my GED and later helping me apply for community college and financial aid. "You're a survivor, Katherine," she told me one day. "But you don't have to just survive anymore. You can thrive." Trust didn't come easily after what I'd experienced. I flinched at unexpected touches. I kept people at a distance. My roommate Danielle eventually broke through those barriers with her straightforward kindness. She never pushed for my story, but offered her own abuse, foster care, and finally independence. We recognized in each other the hypervigilance that comes from trauma, and a friendship slowly blossomed. "Family isn't who you're born to," Danielle would say. "It's who makes you feel safe." With Jessica's encouragement, I started therapy at a community center that offered sliding scale services. Every session was painful, excavating trauma I'd tried to bury, but gradually I began to heal. My therapist helped me understand that none of the abuse had been my fault, that my parents' failure to protect me was their shame not mine. One significant step in reclaiming my identity was changing my last name. I couldn't bear carrying my father's name any longer, so at 18 I legally became Katherine Bennett, taking my grandmother's maiden name. It was a small act of rebellion and self-determination that felt enormously powerful. By 20, I had earned my GED and was enrolled in community college studying social work, a path inspired by Jessica and others who had helped me rebuild my life. I worked fewer hours, but better paying ones as an administrative assistant at a law firm, which gave me more time to focus on my education. At 24, I graduated with my associate's degree and transferred to a 4-year university to complete my bachelor's in social work. It was there that I met Michael Anderson in a psychology elective course. Unlike the few disastrous dates I'd attempted before him, Michael didn't set off any of my internal alarms. His patience and genuine respect created a space where, over time, I could lower my defenses. On our 5th date, I told him pieces of my history. I expected him to run, but instead he simply listened, thanked me for trusting him, and assured me that we could take things at whatever pace I needed. It was the beginning of learning that love shouldn't hurt, that relationships could be nurturing rather than destructive. For the first time since fleeing my family's home, I allowed myself to imagine a future that included not just survival, but happiness. Michael and I married when I was 26, shortly after I completed my bachelor's degree in social work. Our wedding was small, just a few close friends who had become the family I chose. Sarah, now in her 70s, proudly filled the role that should have been my mother's. Danielle was my maid of honor. Jessica, who had stayed in touch throughout the years, traveled from Chicago to attend. "You've come so far," Jessica whispered as she hugged me at the reception. "This is what healing looks like." After the wedding, Michael and I decided to move to Seattle for a fresh start. He had received a job offer in software development there, and I was eager to establish my career somewhere new, somewhere without shadows of my past. I found work at a women's crisis center using my personal experience and professional training to help others escaping situations similar to what I had survived. Working with trauma survivors was both triggering and healing. Each woman or child who came through our doors reflected some aspect of my own journey, and helping them navigate the complex path to safety and recovery helped me process my own ongoing healing. I became particularly skilled at working with teenage girls, fleeing family abuse, able to speak their language of fear and doubt with authentic understanding. 2 years into our marriage, after extensive discussions and therapy, Michael and I decided to try for a family. The decision terrified me. I had no positive models for parenting, no framework for what healthy motherhood looked like. My greatest fear was somehow perpetuating the cycle of abuse despite intellectually knowing I would never harm a child. "You are not your family," my therapist assured me during one particularly emotional session. "Your awareness alone creates a different path." When I became pregnant with twins, the mix of joy and anxiety was overwhelming. Michael held my hand through panic attacks and middle-of-the-night fears. We attended parenting classes together, and I read every book I could find on breaking generational trauma. Our twins, Emma and Ethan, were born when I was 29, two perfect babies who immediately became the center of our universe. Holding them for the first time, I made silent promises that their childhood would bear no resemblance to mine. They would know without question that they were loved, valued, and safe. For 8 years, I kept those promises, creating the stable, loving home I had never experienced. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning in March, an email arrived that shattered the careful peace I had constructed. From Amanda Wilson. Subject: Please read. Important family matter. Katherine. It's been a long time. I'm reaching out because I have stage 4 cancer. The doctors have given me less than a year. Before I go, I need to make amends for the past. I have 2 children now who deserve to know their aunt. Mom and Dad are older and have been asking about you. I know things were difficult between us growing up, but I've changed. Please consider meeting with us, for my children's sake, if not for mine. Amanda. My hands shook so violently that I dropped my phone. Suddenly, I was 16 again, trapped and terrified. Michael found me on the bathroom floor hyperventilating. After helping me through the panic attack, he read the email and immediately recognized it for what it was: manipulation wrapped in a veneer of reconciliation. "You don't owe her a response," he reminded me. "Your obligation is to yourself and our children, not to the people who hurt you." Still, the email haunted me. I couldn't stop thinking about Amanda's children innocent in all this. After discussing it with my therapist, I decided to do some investigating before making any decision. A quick social media search revealed that Amanda had indeed had a second child. Her oldest would be around 8, now the same age as my twins, and her younger child appeared to be about 6. What was conspicuously absent from any of her social media was any mention of illness. There were recent photos of her at the beach looking perfectly healthy, with no evidence of cancer treatment. A deeper dive into family connections confirmed my suspicions the terminal cancer was a lie designed to provoke my sympathy and compliance. I drafted and deleted dozens of responses before settling on a simple final message. "Amanda, I've verified that you are not ill. Please do not contact me again. Any further attempts at communication will be considered harassment. Katherine Bennett." I blocked her email address, tightened privacy settings on all my accounts, and tried to put the incident behind me. But the damage was done. The carefully constructed wall between my past and present had been breached. What I didn't know then was that Michael's wife, Tracy, believing she was helping, had secretly responded to Amanda from her own email account. Tracy knew only the barest outline of my history, the sanitized version I shared with people outside my innermost circle. In her mind, she was facilitating a beautiful family reunion, helping heal old wounds before it was too late. 3 weeks later, Tracy suggested we try a new restaurant across town for our monthly date night. As we were seated, I immediately sensed something was wrong. The hostess led us to a large table in a private area despite my request for a table for 2. As we rounded the corner, I froze. Sitting there smiling expectantly were my parents Amanda and 2 children I had never met. "Surprise," Tracy said, squeezing my arm. "I thought it was time for healing. Amanda reached out to me and we planned this together." The room tilted sideways. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself, my fight-or-flight response screaming at maximum volume. My father looked older but just as stern. My mother dabbed at theatrical tears. Amanda wore an expression of practiced remorse that didn't reach her eyes. "Katherine, sweetheart," my mother said, rising to approach me. "We've missed you so much." I backed away, colliding with Tracy. "What have you done?" I whispered to her. Michael, immediately grasping the situation, stepped between me and my family. "We're leaving," he stated firmly. "Don't be ridiculous," my father said dismissively. "We've come all this way. Your wife has gone to great lengths to arrange this reunion." "Ex-wife," I corrected automatically, the betrayal cutting deep. I couldn't even look at Tracy. As we turned to leave, Amanda called out, "Don't you want to meet your nephews?" Despite myself, I glanced at the 2 boys sitting quietly at the table. What I saw made my blood run cold. The older boy, Jackson, had the same hunched posture I recognized from my own childhood photos, the physical manifestation of constant criticism. The younger boy, Lucas, flinched when Amanda reached toward him. Their eyes held the wary, hypervigilant look I still sometimes caught in the mirror. In that moment, I knew I couldn't just walk away. Those boys were showing the same signs of abuse I had displayed at their age. The cycle was continuing. "I need a minute," I said to Michael, stepping outside to catch my breath. As I stood on the sidewalk trying to calm my racing heart, I made a decision. I couldn't save myself as a child, but perhaps I could save these boys. It wouldn't be through the false reconciliation my family wanted, but through the legal system that had failed me years before. This time, I had resources, knowledge, and power they couldn't imagine. I returned to the table with Michael, my face a careful mask of composure. "I need time," I told them. "This is overwhelming. Let's exchange contact information and proceed slowly." My family, believing they had won, readily agreed. As we left the restaurant, Tracy trailing behind, apologizing profusely, I already knew what I had to do. The frightened teenager who fled in the night had become a woman who knew how to fight, and this time I wouldn't be fighting just for myself. The morning after the ambush dinner, I called in sick to work and made 3 important phone calls. The first was to Brianna Parker, a close friend who happened to be one of the best family law attorneys in Seattle. The second was to David Reynolds, a private investigator I had worked with through the Crisis Center. The third was to my longtime therapist, Dr. Matthews, to schedule an emergency session. "I need your help," I told Brianna, my voice steadier than I felt. "My estranged family has resurfaced, and I have reason to believe 2 children are in danger." Over the next week, David began building a comprehensive file on my family. He discovered that after Amanda's first child was born, my parents had relocated to be near her in Portland, creating the same insulated family unit that had protected her during my abuse. Social media and public records painted a picture of outward normalcy. My father still working in finance, my mother involved in church activities, Amanda now married to a man named Robert Jacobs, not Tyler. The most disturbing information came from Jackson's school records, which David obtained through contacts in the Portland school system. Multiple teacher concerns had been documented: withdrawal from activities, declining grades, unexplained absences, and 2 visits to the school nurse for injuries inadequately explained as sports accidents. I agonized over how to proceed. Direct confrontation had failed me before, and rushing in without sufficient evidence could backfire catastrophically. After consulting with Brianna, I decided on a calculated risk. I would pretend to consider reconciliation to gather evidence while building a case for intervention. "This will be incredibly difficult for you emotionally," Dr. Matthews warned during our session. "Are you certain you can handle this level of contact with your abusers?" "I'm not that defenseless teenager anymore," I replied, "and those boys deserve the advocate I never had." Michael was concerned but supportive. "I'll be with you every step," he promised. "But at the first sign this is harming you, we pull back and find another way." Over the next month, I allowed carefully controlled contact with my family. Sunday video calls, exchanged emails. I even agreed to a day visit where they would come to Seattle, meeting in a public park where I felt safer. Each interaction was a masterclass in acting on my part, pretending to cautiously warm to their overtures while documenting everything. During the park meeting, I observed the family dynamics with trained eyes. My parents still deferred to Amanda in subtle ways. Robert, her husband, seemed perpetually anxious, jumping to anticipate Amanda's needs. But most telling were the boys, Jackson reserved and watchful, and Lucas staying physically close to his father while maintaining distance from Amanda. When Lucas accidentally spilled his drink, the flash of fear in his eyes as he looked to Amanda was unmistakable. Her response, though measured in front of me, held an underlying tension that raised the hair on my neck. "It's fine, sweetie," she said with a tight smile. "We'll discuss being more careful later." The phrase sent shivers through me. "We'll discuss this later" had been her prelude to abuse in our childhood. After that visit, I asked David to intensify his investigation. He placed legal surveillance on their home in Portland and interviewed neighbors under the pretext of a background check for Amanda's volunteer work at a community center, a position I'd learned about and leveraged for information. The picture that emerged was damning. One elderly neighbor reported hearing frequent screaming from the house. Another mentioned seeing Jackson outside late at night, sometimes in cold weather. A third had witnessed Amanda roughly handling Lucas in their driveway when she thought no one was watching. Critically, David discovered that neither boy was Tyler's biological child, despite Amanda's first pregnancy coinciding with the time he was in her life. DNA records from a heritage website Amanda had used revealed both boys had been registered but with paternity listed as unknown. The implications were horrifying. Was Amanda continuing the pattern of abuse with other victims who fathered her children? Or worse, was there truth to my adolescent fear about the paternity of her first child? I shared everything with Brianna, who advised me that we had enough to warrant a child welfare check, but not enough for guaranteed removal from the home. That's when I made the hardest decision I would need to get Amanda to incriminate herself directly. "I want to meet privately," I told Amanda during our next video call. "Just sisters to talk about the past before we move forward." Amanda readily agreed, perhaps seeing an opportunity to manipulate me without witnesses. We arranged to meet at a hotel halfway between Seattle and Portland. What she didn't know was that I would be wearing a legal recording device, and Brianna would be in the adjacent room with a court reporter documenting everything. The day of the meeting, I felt physically ill. Michael drove me to the hotel but honored my request to handle the actual conversation alone. "Remember who you are now," he said, squeezing my hand before I exited the car. "You're not that powerless girl anymore." Amanda arrived looking confident, giving me an artificial hug I forced myself to return. In the privacy of the hotel room, I began carefully asking general questions about her life, her marriage, her children. Then gradually, I steered the conversation toward our shared past. "I've been in therapy for years because of what happened," I said, watching her closely. "It's been hard to process everything." Amanda's expression shifted subtly. "That was a complicated time for everyone," she said dismissively. "We were both confused teenagers." "Confused," I repeated, letting genuine emotion enter my voice. "Amanda, you sexually abused me for years. Our parents enabled it. There was no confusion about what was happening." Her response chilled me to the core. Instead of denial, she smiled the same cruel smile I remembered from my nightmares. "And who would have believed you then? Who would believe you now?" she asked softly. "Our parents always knew what was best for the family. Some things need to stay private." "Like what happened with Tyler," I pressed. A flash of anger crossed her face. "Tyler was an idiot. He couldn't keep his mouth shut, so he had to go. And Jackson and Lucas's fathers?" "Irrelevant," she said coldly. "My boys know better than to ask questions, just like you should have." Over the next hour, with careful prompting, Amanda revealed the horrifying truth. She spoke with complete detachment about the abuse, showing no remorse. She confirmed my parents had known much more than they pretended, choosing to protect her and the family's reputation over my safety. Most disturbingly, she alluded to continuing patterns of behavior with her own children. "Children need firm guidance," she said when I asked about her parenting. "Some need to learn their place more than others. Jackson is difficult like you were. Lucas is learning faster." By the time she left, I was physically shaking, but had exactly what we needed: a confession and clear indications of ongoing child abuse. I immediately joined Brianna in the next room, where she and the court reporter had documented everything. "This is more than enough," Brianna said grimly. "We're going to emergency court tomorrow morning." The next 48 hours moved with breathtaking speed. Based on the recording, prior evidence, and my testimony, the judge issued an emergency removal order for both boys. Portland Police and Child Protective Services conducted a raid on Amanda's home, finding conditions consistent with abuse: locks on the outside of the boys' bedroom doors, inadequate food, and a basement room with disturbing similarities to where my own abuse had occurred. Both boys were immediately placed in emergency foster care. When questioned by specialized child psychologists, they revealed patterns of abuse that mirrored my own childhood experiences. Jackson, being older, had endured the worst of it while trying to protect his younger brother. Criminal charges followed swiftly. Amanda was arrested for child abuse and endangerment. My parents were charged as accessories for their knowledge and failure to protect. Robert, Amanda's husband, received lesser charges due to evidence that he had also been subjected to Amanda's manipulation and abuse, though his failure to protect the children still carried legal consequences. Throughout the investigation, additional disturbing information emerged. DNA testing confirmed my worst fears. Jackson's paternity showed a familial match to me, supporting the terrible suspicion I'd had years ago about Amanda's first pregnancy. The full horror of what my family had covered up was finally exposed to legal scrutiny. The day my family appeared for their arraignment, I sat in the courtroom, Michael beside me, watching as they were led in wearing orange jumpsuits and handcuffs. My father avoided my gaze. My mother stared at me with hatred. Amanda, for the first time in her life, looked afraid. As the charges were read, multiple counts of child abuse, child endangerment, criminal neglect, and in Amanda's case, sexual assault of a minor, I felt no joy, only a profound sense that a generational cycle of abuse had finally been broken. The judge set trial dates and denied bail for Amanda, deeming her a flight risk and danger to the community. As they were led away, Amanda looked back at me with the expression I had never seen on her face before defeat. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by a small group of supporters, Michael, Brianna, Jessica, who had flown in from Chicago, Sarah using a walker but determined to be present, I faced a cluster of reporters. "Why now, after all these years?" one asked. I looked directly into the cameras, thinking of the frightened children now safely in therapeutic foster care. "Because every child deserves protection," I said steadily, "and it's never too late for justice." 8 months after my family's arrest, I stood in a different courtroom, my hand trembling slightly as I signed the final adoption papers. Jackson and Lucas, now my legal sons rather than nephews, waited in the hallway with Michael and our twins. The family court judge smiled warmly as she stamped the documents. "Congratulations, Mrs. Bennett," she said. "Those boys are very fortunate to have you." The journey to this moment had been arduous. After their removal from Amanda's home, the boys had been placed in specialized therapeutic foster care while the legal process unfolded. Michael and I had undergone additional parenting evaluations and home studies to qualify as adoptive parents, all while supporting the boys through regular visitation and therapy. My parents and Amanda had all received significant prison sentences after plea agreements that spared the children from testifying. My father got 8 years for child endangerment and accessory to abuse. My mother received 6 years on similar charges. Amanda was sentenced to 20 years for multiple counts of child abuse, endangerment, and sexual assault of a minor, with the evidence from my childhood finally finding justice, alongside the more recent crimes against her sons. When I walked out of the courtroom with the finalized adoption papers, 4 children rushed toward me. Emma and Ethan, now 9, and their cousins, turned brothers, Jackson, 8, and Lucas, 6. Michael wrapped his arms around all of us, our family circle now complete. "Is it official?" Jackson asked, his eyes still carrying wariness that broke my heart. "Yes," I said, kneeling to his level. "You and Lucas are officially Bennett's now, if that's still what you want." Both boys nodded vigorously. Over the months of therapy and healing, they had begun to understand that what happened in their birth home wasn't normal or acceptable. They had started to believe that adults could be trustworthy, that love didn't have to hurt. The transition wasn't seamless. Jackson struggled with nightmares and trust issues much as I had at his age. Lucas had developed selective mutism, speaking only to Jackson and gradually to Ethan, who had appointed himself Lucas's official best friend and protector. Both boys flinched at loud noises and needed constant reassurance that they weren't in trouble for small mistakes. But there were beautiful moments too. The first time Lucas laughed, really laughed during a family game night. The day Jackson willingly hugged Michael. The afternoon I found all 4 children building an elaborate fort in the living room, the older 3 carefully including Lucas in every decision. We established clear family therapy as our new normal individual sessions for each child, couples counseling for Michael and me to navigate the challenges of parenting traumatized children, and family sessions where we learned to communicate safely together. Our household rules were simple but sacred. Everyone deserves respect. All feelings are valid, and asking for help is always brave. The foundation I had created to help young abuse victims, started 2 years before my family reemerged, took on new significance. With first-hand experience of the legal system from both sides, now I expanded the foundation's services to include specialized legal advocacy for child victims. Jessica came on board as our Chicago coordinator, creating a bi-coastal presence that helped twice as many children escape abusive situations. A year after the adoption, I received an unexpected letter from my father's prison. I debated throwing it away unopened, but ultimately decided to read it with my therapist present. The letter contained what appeared to be a genuine acknowledgement of his failures, how he had chosen the easier path of believing Amanda over protecting me, how he had perpetuated the cycle of abuse through his willful blindness, and how prison had finally forced him to confront his role in the destruction of 2 generations of children. "I don't expect or deserve forgiveness," he wrote in conclusion. "But I wanted you to know that you were always the strong one, the righteous one. I was too weak to see it then, but I see it now." I didn't respond to the letter. Perhaps someday I would, But for now, my energy was focused on healing my own and that of the 4 children depending on Michael and me to break the cycle for good. On the second anniversary of the boys' adoption, we held a special family celebration at home. As I looked around our dining room table, Michael at one end, me at the other, 4 children between us, passing dishes and giggling at inside jokes, I felt a sense of peace that once seemed impossible. "I have something to say," Jackson announced, suddenly standing up with the formality of someone much older. "2 years ago, I thought family meant people who hurt you and each other. Now I know that's not true. Family is people who help you feel safe and strong." Emma raised her juice glass. To family, everyone clinked glasses, even Lucas, who had recently started speaking in group settings. Later, after the children were in bed, Michael and I sat on our back porch watching the stars, his arm around my shoulders. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been?" he asked quietly. "If you hadn't found the courage to leave at 16? I considered his question, thinking about the generations of abuse that had finally ended with my decision to run away that September morning. "I think about the alternative all the time," I admitted. "But I prefer to focus on this." I gestured toward our home where 4 children slept safely. "This is what makes the journey worthwhile." The cycle that began long before my birth had ended. The frightened girl who fled in the night had become a woman who could protect not only herself, but others. The family that had tried to break me had ultimately given me the strength and determination to build something better from the ashes of that pain. For those still trapped in situations like mine, know this escape is possible. Healing can happen. The cycle of abuse can be broken. Family isn't determined by blood, but by love, respect, and safety. And sometimes the happiest endings come after the darkest beginnings. If my story has touched you in any way, please share it with someone who might need to hear that survival is possible. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of resilience and recovery. Leave a comment if you've ever had to create your own definition of family. What did that journey teach you? Every like and share helps another survivor find their way to safety. Thank you for listening to my truth. You are not alone, and neither was I, even in my darkest moments.